guests, honored colleagues and students, welcome to the 4th International Workshop of the Munib and Angela Masri Institute of Energy and Natural Resources. Last year, the Masri Institute put together a first-rate workshop that concentrated or focused on policy, finance, discovery, and the logistics of oil and gas exploration. This year, the theme is more scientific, and we are honored today to have this caliber of distinguished speakers at this workshop. Professor Fréchet from King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and Professor Schmidt from the Masri Institute of Science and Technology. They are both at AUB for the first time and will share with us a glimpse of their cutting-edge research in energy topics, including biotechnology and biofuels. We are also happy to see our AUB colleagues from many disciplines in engineering, science, social sciences, and agriculture, sharing their research results on institute-sponsored research grants. The Institute has been able to fund quite a few projects, and today you'll hear on them, something on them. We think of the forum today as a place to initiate and further expand partnership between AUB and distinguished research institutes in the region. I would like to express my appreciation to the Munib Masri Institute, to Munib Masri, his spouse Angela, and his family for their generous support. We are honored by your presence. Without further delay, and in order to catch up with our program today, I would like to immediately invite AUB Provost Dr. Ahmad Dallah to officially open this event. I remember this time.
Good morning. Welcome to the Makram University of Beirut and to the 4th annual International Workshop of the Munib and Angela Masri Institute of Energy and Natural Resources. This year's workshop features two distinguished keynote speakers who have made major contributions to energy research, Professors Fréchet and Schmidt. We are honored to have them here with us today, not only as exceptional scholars, but also as representatives of two of the region's finest research institutions, the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology and the Masri Institute of Science and Technology. We hope that the impact of this gathering will be lasting and that it will strengthen collaborative efforts with colleagues at these sister institutions and pave the way for major advances in energy research which benefit the region and I think also the world. Last year's workshop created an opportunity for our faculty to receive an in-kind donation from Fréchet, a leading supplier of oil and gas technology. Valued at approximately $1.7 million, this state-of-the-art simulation software represented the firm's commitment to bringing on-the-ground experience to Lebanon and to supporting the skills development of Lebanon's future oil and gas professionals, which obviously is quite essential, particularly in this case. This generous gift is a very tangible expression of the benefits that the university and indeed the country are receiving from the Masri Institute initiatives. The Masri Institute is evolving into a tremendous asset for researchers in Lebanon and the region. It was founded to support research and development that lead to the sustainable and responsible use, management, and conservation of energy and natural resources. And it has fulfilled that role admirably. In the 4 years since the Masri Institute was established, it has funded about 90 promising research projects involving over 40 AUB faculty members and numerous graduate students. It also promotes interdisciplinary initiatives, academic and professional collaborations, and fruitful interaction between the university and industry. Today's workshop is only one example of how it meets some of these objectives. AUB's faculty members are also playing an important role. They are leading a major green technology initiative conducted in partnership with other institutions and a variety of other research and professional education projects aimed at promoting the development of new sustainable techniques and technologies to improve transportation, energy, water, and waste systems. They have also spearheaded the development of several graduate programs which expose students to critical issues in energy, sustainability, and environmental science and technology. These programs are not limited solely to the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture, but also involve the faculties of Arts and Sciences, the Agricultural and Food Sciences, and Agricultural and Food Sciences. In June 2012, AUB created the DNU Administrative Unit, the Division of University Interdisciplinary Programs, to provide a responsive environment for the development and support of new graduate programs that draw on the expertise and methodologies current in a range of disciplines. One of these programs is the Master's in Energy Studies, which involves engineering, obviously, natural science, and social science departments. Currently under review by the University's Board of Graduate Studies, the program reflects AUB's abiding commitment to transform energy education and research to serve the policy, choice, and service needs of modern societies, and to provide innovative and evidence-based solutions to regional and global problems. So in closing, I would like to express my appreciation to the Masri Institute Steering Committee, every one of them. Please forgive me for not mentioning your names one by one. And of course, to Dean Suidan and Dean McGreevy specifically, who've been quite instrumental in supporting the initiatives of the Masri Institute. I, of course, would like to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to the Masri family and Trustee Munib Masri in particular, who really pushes us hard, and we need to be pushed. And you know, it's great that he's so committed to developing energy research and academia specifically. We're grateful for their commitment and continued support to AUB and its mission. And of course, I would like to express my gratitude to the invited speakers and AUB faculty and students who are contributing to this workshop. And above all, I would like to thank Abdullah for their dedicated leadership and their steadfast commitment to strengthening energy research and education. Thank you, and have a great day.
The Masri family, their business is in energy. And I'd like to now call on Mr. Omar Masri, who has an unlimited amount of energy, to come down and give us, say a few words about the institute. He has been away from home for 2 weeks and is leaving after this conference here to go. You're going to go home after this, right? Mr. Omar Masri.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Provost Dallah, Dean Suidan, Professor Abdullah, distinguished speakers, guests, and AUB students. It's a true pleasure and honor to be with you this morning. On behalf of my parents, Munib and Angela, and my family, and my sister Mary, it's great to be with you today. We have high hopes and expectations for the Institute, the Masri Institute, and the future role, not only on a local, but on a regional level. As the Institute forges ahead, the Institute aspires to be a true leader and a hub for research and development, not only in the Middle East, but in Africa, inshallah. It shall create opportunities for top quality research and teaching at AUB and at other regional universities by promoting academic and professional collaboration, as we heard from Professor Dallah, interdisciplinary research and interaction with firms engaged in the fields of energy, natural resources, and environment. When it comes to the energy space, the 21st century will undoubtedly be a century of transition. Now more so than ever, it is essential to find innovative and clean solutions in the fields of energy, transport, CO2 emission control to ensure a smooth transition to a low-carbon world. The combination of changes that the industry now faces requires epic rather than incremental responses for the industry to evolve and prosper. Those responsible both inside and outside the industry will need to understand what is happening now and how it may affect the future, to explain their strategies clearly, and to adapt to new solutions as they develop. When we meet again in 12 months, inshallah, at the 5th International Conference organized by the Institute, major progress would have been achieved with regards to Lebanon's first offshore licensing round. Meanwhile, in the coming hours, we will listen to stimulating and thought-provoking topics. I will step aside now and let the experts speak and provide us with a glimpse of the future trends across the energy landscape. Thank you again to the organizers, specifically Professor Abdullah and the AUB for engaging or arranging this important conference. Thank you very much.
I forgot to mention earlier, I'd like to thank Professor Abdullah a lot for all the energy she put into this arranging this conference. When you receive from her an email at 4 in the morning, you realize her day is a very long one. Also, I'd like to mention that we are in the process of preparing a proposal to the university to start the program in petroleum engineering. It will be primarily in engineering with a very strong link to geology and arctic sciences. Now, the next, I'd like to call on Professor McGreevy, Dean McGreevy, to come down and introduce our first speaker for today.
Distinguished visitors, colleagues, and students. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the workshop, Professor Jean Fréchet, a renowned scientist, educator, and entrepreneur who is currently Vice President for Research at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. Before I give a brief introduction to Professor Fréchet's achievements, I would like to extend the deepest congratulations to the AUB and the faculty for the 2013 Japan Prize that he received last week. This is one of the most prestigious international awards a researcher can receive in science and technology. Professor Fréchet joined KAUST after 14 years at the University of California at Berkeley, where he was the Henry Rappaport Chair of Organic Chemistry and Professor of Chemical Engineering. While at Berkeley, he also served as Principal Investigator in the Material Science Division of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and the Scientific Director of the Organic Macromolecular Facility for the Molecular Foundry at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. In his role at KAUST, Professor Fréchet is a leader in developing strategies and managing resources to support interdisciplinary collaborative research, bridging science and engineering. Professor Fréchet, a polymer chemist, is known for contributing in a wide range of fields, including modern electronics and biotechnology. He has authored approximately 900 scientific papers, has over 51,000 citations, and with an H index of 116. Among his many accomplishments, Professor Fréchet developed a combination of advanced materials and methods for the conversion of light into electrical energy, which today enables the production of all state-of-the-art logic and memory chips used in computers, phones, and automobiles. His most recent work focuses on novel materials for therapeutic and energy applications. Professor Fréchet's awards and honors include multiple recognitions from the American Chemical Society, including the Arthur C. Cope Award. He also won the Nagoya Gold Medal in Organic Chemistry in 2009, the 2010 Erasmus Medal of the European Academy, and the Grand Prix de la Maison de Chimie Award in Paris, and most recently shared with his colleague Dr. Grant Wilson the 2013 Japan Prize. Professor Fréchet is a member of the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering. Today, he will be presenting his perspective on energy research from fossil fuels to solar. Please join me in welcoming Professor Jean.
So it's a real pleasure for me to be here. And of course, I want to thank the Masri Institute for organizing these conferences. It's clear that a foundation like the Masri Foundation is very, very important to universities because they help spur research activities in areas where the university may not contribute. And in this specific case, if you look at the target of this Masri Institute, it's energy, natural resources, and this is of course key to the development of the nation, the development of the region, and also key to producing the students that we need for these technologies to develop. So I'm really pleased to see that through the effort of the Masri family, AUB is benefiting and now creating new programs that will generate new people. So thank you very much. I would also like to thank my hosts at AUB. I mean, this has been a wonderful stay here. My first visit in Beirut, and I can tell you, won't be my last. This is such a nice place. So thank you very much for inviting me and showing me so much hospitality. I can't thank all the people, many are here in this room. You know, I want to thank you personally. Today, I have a very strange lecture. A little bit of it is about KAUST, what KAUST is doing in the field of energy. And then being a scientist, I couldn't resist telling you about what I do. This is going to be a little more hairy for some of you who are not in the field of solar energy. So let me start. If I can, here we go. Let me start by telling you a little bit about energy research at KAUST. So KAUST is very new, it's only about 4 years old, and typically it is focused on science and engineering, and in particular we have 9 research centers that are mission-oriented. Their goals are to produce something which can be used in the not-too-distant future. And of the 9 research centers, we have 2 that are clearly entirely focused on energy, clean combustion and solar. But we also have some other research centers that certainly have an impact on energy, mostly because they look at ways to reduce the need for energy. So for example, the Catalysis Center is looking at chemical processes. And of course, catalysis, by definition, will help to reduce the energy needs. Our Membrane Center is focused largely on the development of new materials for gas separation. Saudi Arabia has a lot of gas, but it is sour gas. So it is highly contaminated, if you will, not suitable to be used directly. And we are working on new ways to separate the good from the bad. And of course, this again will bear on energy. And then water desalination. Of course, Saudi Arabia has no rivers, and desalination is very, very important. About a quarter of the desalination done worldwide is done in Saudi Arabia. And this is very, very energy intensive. So we look at new ways to try to reduce the need for energy. So this is, for example, our Clean Combustion Center. I'll just show this to show you the scale of things. We're not very large yet. It's growing, of course. But for example, in the Combustion Center, we have 6 faculty members, 3 experimentalists, 3 computational, and then we have staff that is very, very highly qualified staff. For example, Dr. Min-Suk Cha is a specialist in plasma. Plasma combustion is something that will be important in the future. And then we have, of course, research scientists, postdocs, and the student population, all graduate students, of course, is growing. So what do we do in a center such as this? Well, typically, the research drivers are simply hydrocarbon fuels are not dead. There we talk about new forms of energy, but hydrocarbon fuels will be around for a while. And certainly, when you look at the transportation, it's very difficult to imagine an airplane without hydrocarbon fuel, at least using today's technology. Then there is the issue of pollution control. And we can work on pollution control. Good engineers will do so. But in doing so, they will tweak the engines to work under very extreme conditions. For example, lower temperature to produce less soot, Well, engines don't work very well at low temperature. So what you have to develop is new ways to assist them to perform and perform efficiently. And then we, of course, have to be aware of global warming. That we have to contribute to this in looking at being as efficient as possible. So, our research direction essentially will be to look at new ways to increase fuel efficiency. Now, this includes developing new engines, new types of engines, sort of hybrid between diesel and gasoline engines. A new thing that probably would be more efficient and maybe less costly. Then we have to understand. If you understand, you can control. So that's the idea. Get fundamental understanding, then apply it. Look at the new ways to do combustion. For example, plasma-aided combustion. And then develop some predictive tools. You can't just go and try things. You've got to develop technology that will help you to predict what will happen. So we have very good facilities, for example, for lab measuring soot. Soot experiments are very important because we want to reduce soot. We want to measure the kinetics of fuel. So this is a shock tube which is longer than this room for very sophisticated experiments involving chemical kinetics. We have a combustion lab, of course, very much laser equipped to follow what happens during combustion. And then, of course, we have engines. You need to face reality and look at where the combustion is taking place. Just a little example. Looking at soot. As you know today, fuels in gasoline are mixtures of many, many components. Typically, components that are linear hydrocarbon and others that are aromatic hydrocarbon. For example, isooctane and toluene. Well, today, toluene is a very important component of a mixture. And yet, the fuels that we have produce soot. Where does it come from? So we looked at it under different ways. We looked at how isooctane burns. It burns without soot. Then we looked at toluene, how it burns. It burns with some soot. But look what happens when you have a half and half mixture, which is pretty much what happens today. You have more soot. The synergistic effect. Why is it that when you put the two together, it produces more soot? And clearly, this is some finding that helps us to look for a new type of fuel where we will produce that soot. And for this, we had to develop lots of experiments. You can't do it by looking at the flame directly. You can't do it with this technique. But then you can do it by this laser-induced fluorescence because the soot is made up of compounds like this that fluoresce. So you can see it. Okay, so we have lots of studies on fuels and trying to reduce, for example, the formation of soot. And then we look at turbines. Turbines, of course, are used in aircraft, but they're also used in the production of power, electrical power. And for turbines, we need a very, very specialized equipment. So we're building this very special lab. It is a high temperature, high pressure turbine lab. It's the only one in the world. It will be finished this summer. Everybody is looking at it saying, hey, what is going to come out of this? So it has rather huge equipment. For example, this is one of the combustion chambers. It weighs 10 tons. It is 8 meters tall. So you need a specially designed building. You also need a protective area in the case the thing blows up. Who knows? Actually, of course, these are well planned. Okay, so these are the type of facilities that we build. They provide us with a unique way to look at new ways to run turbines, how to modify turbines. And for example, this is a target that we have. To look not at the classical turbine. A classical turbine works at constant pressure. And this reduces the efficiency of the turbine. But they all work this way. We are looking at the new type of turbine that works at constant volume. So we designed this to work at constant volume. And calculation, this is just simulation, suggests we might get 25% better efficiency. 25% is pretty good. Okay, so if we realize this, certainly it will be a major accomplishment. So there are many, many projects looking at new fuel formulations, using heavy fuel. Heavy fuel, of course, is a problem. It doesn't burn well. It produces a lot of soot, okay, lots of pollution. So we're looking at ways to use this fuel more efficiently. We look at ways to do reforming of gas, and this we are looking at ways using the plasma, and so on. So many, many activities of this type. Let me move on now to solar. We have a solar center, Solar Photovoltaic Engineering Center, where of course we look at photovoltaics to provide an alternative to burning fossil fuel. And Saudi Arabia is just now starting a program where it is expected that it will spend about $110 billion on solar energy. So just starting now, we are quite involved in this program. And clearly, it involves using today's technology, but also developing tomorrow's technology that will be more efficient. And that's one of the aims of our center. So we aim to look at high efficiency, to produce these things very quickly, and in the Middle East also. And then, is it sustainable? Can it be used under the conditions of Saudi Arabia, which are very high heat, dust, salt? There are many things that are not very, very good for lifetime often. So of course, when you look at photovoltaics, there are many, many types of solar cells that can be used. The most common will be the silicon cells, but there are other types, concentrated cells, thin films, and so on. For us at KAUST, we are only interested in flexible cells, thin film, because silicon is very, very mature. Concentrator is more technology with existing high-performance cells. Now, you know, when you look at solar cells, the price of solar cells has been going down very, very fast, especially since China got into the game. You can see that in the 70s, the price was enormous. This is dollars per watt. Today, of course, it has gone to less than the dollar per watt, which means it now can compete with the price of electricity produced by conventional sources. Now, this is a big, big change. Okay? What you got to do now is make the technology practical and long-term. So you see, for example, this is a Yingli green energy company. This is a major producer in China. Look at how they have brought the price down. 62 cents now per watt for modules. So this is now getting very, very low. Now what's happening there is that they have driven the price down somewhat artificially, which is driving many companies out of business, including some Chinese companies. Okay? And the issue is, how long will they be able to sustain this downward slope? If they go too long, it's a risk for the development of better technologies. Okay? So that's certainly a very important factor. So at KAUST, we have an area called New Energy Oasis where we test solar cells, all manufacturers. So we bring their solar cells and then we test them under the conditions of the desert. So this is very relevant to the country, of course. So we have many, many types of solar cells, and we see how they perform in the long term. So this is an example of a cell that you can see we are testing two cells. This is 6 a.m., the sun is coming out, the cells start producing electricity, and it will peak around noon. We stop at noon here, but of course it will go down. In the afternoon it will be fairly high, and then it will go down. So you can see here clearly this cell produces more than this one. Okay? So clearly you have a nice way to compare. But this is not enough, really. Oh, by the way, this is the roof of our building. We have 2 megawatts on the roof of our building, which probably is just enough to run a supercomputer. It's very, very energy hungry. So you can see the performance of these cells over the year. Of course, as you go in winter, this is December, there is less sunshine and the productivity decreases. And then it goes up again. So we have 2 years of performance here. And of course, this is important to follow how these silicon cells perform in the environment of Saudi Arabia. Now I should say, there is one place where we are cheating. These are on our roofs. And we have a lot of water. We have a desalination plant that produces 58,000 tons of water a day. So we can wash the cells. If we didn't wash them, believe me, they wouldn't perform so much. They wouldn't perform, of course, because the dust is an issue. So here I show, for example, the performance of a cell with time. This is one of the cells we are testing. It starts close to 10%, and with time the performance degrades, going down to 7% or less. And then if you wash, it goes back to normal, and it will continue. So clearly this issue of dust is critical. It is critical, and what we have now, we are studying some robotic cleaning. We are developing robots that go on the cell and will clean them. We are also looking at some very simple technology. For example, Hitachi company in Japan is placing their cell vertically rather than at an angle. And these are remarkably dust resistant. Why? Because the dust falls off. Okay? Now I should say it's not quite that simple. When you are close to the sea, for example, you find that dust particles are coated with sulfate. And sulfate sticks. If you are in the desert, in the Arctic water, for example, the dust is not coated. It doesn't stick. So there is chemistry to be done to look at what treatment is needed for each environment you plan to have your systems built. This is, of course, the issue, sandstorms. We have quite a few of those. And we monitor them. So this is the roof of our building. We have a monitoring station that gathers dust, and every 15 minutes sends the data by satellite to a center where we collect this data to learn where is the dust, where does it go. And for example, we can model, and we're starting to predict these dust events. And you can see, for example, this is the Red Sea. This is a dust storm over the Red Sea. We are located right here. And you can map this. So this is a map of Saudi Arabia. And you can see you don't want to place something near Riyadh. There is too much dust. Or very near us. There's a lot of dust. But here, that's a good area, no dust. So there are large parts of the country where the dust is minimal, relatively, except for some incredible events. So this is a Red Sea here. This is a dust storm monitored by satellite and by a monitoring station. This dust storm goes all the way from Iraq to Egypt. I'm sorry, this movie is not working well. But it becomes incredible. The whole region suddenly becomes engulfed in a huge storm. And this was the worst they had seen in a long, long time. And of course, it left a big, thick coating of dust, meaning no solar cell would ever work under these conditions. Let me move on. So this is what our center does. It's essentially looking at thin film photovoltaics, roll-to-roll fabrication, printing it, if you will, like a newspaper, so it will be cheap, so it can be produced very, very quickly. We look at inorganic materials as well as organic materials. I'll come into some detail, much to your dismay, probably in a few minutes. So this is an area of our center. So these are printers to print solar cells. This is in a very large clean room, probably too large for what we need to do with it. These are some of the equipment. We have a very good laser lab to study in detail why they work and how we can improve them. This is a printing of solar cells with inkjet printer, roll-to-roll printing, evaporating, and so on. So a big facility. About $100 million was invested in this facility. This is a typical thin-film photovoltaic. So it has essentially two electrodes. One is transparent, of course, the light has to go in. The other one is metallic. And then in between is what is active, what is essentially helping you to produce electricity from solar light. So typically, for example, we're looking at what is called SIGs. So these are the initials of the metals that are contained into this type of system. This is a different one, actually. Now, let's look, for example, at the cell commercially produced with SIGs. They are made by evaporation process, evaporation of copper, indium, gallium, and selenium. They are produced by sputtering and so on. And there are companies making it. It's commercial today, but they have trouble because of the pricing of China. The efficiency is comparable to the routine silicon cells, not the monocrystalline silicon cells. But it's very difficult to have the right ratio of these four elements. So what we do is we study it in a way where we make many of those cells slightly different from each other. And let me explain. What we do is, well, we use, this is the electrode, if you will, it's coated, it's a glass surface, in this case coated with molybdenum. And then what we do is we sputter, we throw on the surface, if you will, some particles of these elements that we need. So we have indium, copper, and gallium somewhere. That G, I guess it moved a little bit. We sputter this on the surface. So we have this machine, we use a machine that can sputter 4 elements at a time. But it can, for example, send more of one than the other. So it can change very quickly the composition. And this is very important because what we can do is produce many cells in a very short time. So this is a lengthy process. We do this combinatorial sputtering, then we add selenium, and then we process, and eventually we form the solar cells. These are the solar cells. And then we have a robot that tests the solar cells. So this robot is measuring. Here we have 220 cells, all made with slightly different composition at the same time. And this robot is measuring each of them very quickly, telling us how they perform. So these are the results. This is again the chamber that is used. These are the results. It doesn't mean anything to you because it's a sort of a color diagram, but it means that when we change composition, adding a little bit of sodium, a little dopant into it, the performance changes drastically. Here, for example, the cell with this composition, it's producing 10% of electricity. Here it's producing 16% efficiency. So very quickly you can determine what is the best composition. You can make small changes that have a very big effect. And of course, to do this, you need to do many experiments. So here, for example, we made 6,000 solar cells in 3 months. Okay? That's a lot of solar cells. And of course, you need robots to do this. You would not be able to do it without the use of robots. There is an issue there. The issue is that these thin-film photovoltaics use metals that are quite expensive and rare. Indium is often used and tellurium is often used. And these are quite rare. They are certainly as rare as gold. Okay? Actually, probably more. There is a lot of gold in circulation in the world. But these are hard to get. The prices are not too bad today. Only $360 a kilo. But as demand increases, the prices go up. So today, the effect is very small, 2 cents per watt. But if the price becomes higher, it becomes a major component of the price. So what we need to do now is look at metals. This is the abundance of metals. We want to look at new things that are very common. Tin, zinc, copper, sulfur. These are cheap. So that probably we could move into new types of cells that would be affordable. Now, let me move into the bad part of science, what I do in my lab. So this is done mostly at Berkeley, in my lab at Berkeley. And we work with organic photovoltaics. There are no commercial organic photovoltaic cells today. Why? Because they're not efficient enough. But of course, it's a nice challenge. After all, some time ago, there were no good solar cells at all. And then what's important is with organic materials, you could make cells remarkably cheap. It would be like printing a newspaper, ink. So this is very attractive. So these are some of the cells we produce in my lab. See, they have different colors because they have different composition. They absorb different wavelengths of light. And this is, of course, very important. We can make them flexible. The efficiency, of course, is not very good. But the main thing is the organic material absorbs light 1,000 times better than silicon. So instead of needing a thick layer of silicon, thick 1 millimeter, we go into a few microns or less. Okay? So it means you use very little ink. One bottle of ink makes many cells. That's the idea. So this is a typical organic photovoltaic device, and this is how it works. Typically, what we have is we have two components, a polymer and another molecule, which is based on a fullerene. This conducts negative charge, if you will. This conducts. Okay? So we blend the two, and then we shine light. And when you shine light on the system, what happens is that you will excite some electrons from the HOMO layer to the LUMO layer. Now I'm digging into your chemistry background. Okay? This is the essential process. This is where the energy is utilized. The next step will be we have to separate these charges. And to separate these charges, they have to migrate to a point where the two types of materials meet. And this is quite difficult to do. So we have an electron, and this is called the hole, plus and minus charges. We have to split them. This is hard to do. Now if you split them, eventually they will migrate to their electrode and to their electrode. And then of course you get a current. Okay? So this is the whole idea, this is what we have to do. The other factor that we have to deal with is the solar spectrum. The light from the sun is, this is a visible light, this is what we see around here. But the light of the solar spectrum is more intense in this region. This is infrared, far infrared. And typically, most of the compounds today absorb light here. Well, what about all this part of the solar spectrum? If you ignore it, you'll have a very low efficiency. So you have to tune the material to try to absorb as much of the light as possible, visible as well as infrared light. And that's difficult to do. So there are many factors that are important. It's the so-called band gap of the material. This band gap corresponds to how much light you will absorb. You would like this distance between HOMO and LUMO to be as small as possible. Then you would absorb more of the solar spectrum. Then how much voltage can you produce? Well, it is the difference between the HOMO of the P-type material and the LUMO of the N-type material. You would like to have a good voltage. Okay, so all of these things are important. I won't go into too much detail. But still, you have to design things. Okay? And designing is very important. So this is a design that we developed in my lab, which is really important design. We found that we could find good materials that did what we wanted. They were either at one end of the spectrum or at the other end. So what we did is we combined what we call a donor, something that can give electrons, to an acceptor, something that accepts electrons. So this is what we do. We combine donor and acceptor. When you do this, you make a new molecule. And of course, when you look at molecular orbitals, you combine molecular orbitals. And instead of having a band gap, which is this big, meaning not much light absorbed, you have this much, which means you absorb much more light. So by this chemical combination of different parts into the same molecule, you obtain what you are looking for, an ability to absorb more light and be more productive. So of course, a lot of people have published in this area, and the cells were performing 5, 6, 7%, which was a big improvement already in the past. And this is what we did in our lab. We selected this type of molecule because we liked it for many reasons. We liked the symmetry of the molecule. It's easier to work with. We like the fact that it has electron withdrawing groups. We like the fact that the molecule is flat. It makes communication between molecules easier. Electron can hop from one to the next. And then we start making these molecules. And this is very much how we make them. This is called a Stille coupling, a very complex reaction catalyzed by palladium, where you produce a polymer. So this is a polymer. This repeats many times. So we have a donor acceptor. So this is, the hard legwork that has to be done. And then you look at how well they perform. And here again, small changes are very important. These molecules that we make tend to be a little bit like brick dust. They're not very soluble. How are you going to make an ink if you have brick dust? You have to dissolve it into something. So what we do is, this is the active part of the molecule. We attach to it these things that look a little bit like oil that make it soluble. We can now dissolve it into something. And these solubilizing groups are very important. And it turns out that the nature of the solubilizing group itself is important in performance. If we have a linear chain, like in octane, for example, then it performs better. The performance is shown by the area between the axis and the curve. So this is not as good as this one. And this one is the best. It's the best. So a small little change, solubilizing group, changes in performance. Okay, so there is a lot of work that is being done in these areas. And clearly, this in a chemistry lab takes a bit of time. This is a little bit involved, of course. You know, the way we look at this, of course, is we look, these are the molecules on the surface of your photocells. So they tend to be flat molecules. And what's important is how they pack. What is the distance between this layer and the layer above it? Okay? What is the distance between this one and the one next to it on the same level? And all of this we can measure by X-ray. And we find, of course, that when these solubilizing groups are small, when they pack better, then the performance becomes better. So this is the performance. 6.8 is better than 4. Okay. So, you know, by tweaking these things, and of course by understanding, I show you these X-rays because they allow us to understand. If you understand, you can find a solution. Otherwise, it's guesswork. Where are you going with guesswork? There are other issues. The voltage that you can obtain from photovoltaic cells. It's important, the voltage. Okay, you have a telephone. Telephone needs a certain type of battery that produces the right voltage. So you want the voltage to be significant, sufficiently high, and of course it's measured right here, this voltage. And if I change the chemical nature of my building blocks, if I raise this, lower that, then I get a bigger voltage. So by chemical design, we can control the efficiency, the voltage, the essential components of the functioning of the solar cell. And this is probably one of the better polymers made in my lab. It uses this fullerene to transport electrons, this transport holes. And typically, the efficiency in my lab was already 8%, which is quite good for an organic material. Okay, I mean, we have the world record for a single layer cell, it's 8.5%. So this was quite good. We, of course, tweak these things. This is the best one today. The best in the world, 8.5%. And it's amazing, you know, just changing a little bit. Changing, for example, from this type of solubilizing group to a shorter one, the efficiency doubles. We would never guess that. Never. So, you know, you really need to do the experiments and then understand what's going on. Now we understand. We did X-ray, we see the packing is better, we see many, many things, and understanding provides a solution. The power conversion efficiency. So it's essentially how much of the sun power you're actually gathering. To be commercial, you need to be at least 12% or so. Okay. Oh, I think I will skip a little bit of this. This is very, very involved. You find very little things can change totally the performance. For example, you make a cell in the lab, photocell, you measure it, 8%. You come back the next day, 6%. That's not very good. A cell that will last a day. Okay? So you try to say, well, why? Again, understanding is the key. And we had this problem. We had this problem that we made some cells that perform well, and then after a day they were quite bad. So we looked at the reason why, and we found it was impurities. This is, for example, the power. So this is standardized. This is full power the first day. And as you go with time, it goes down. That's very bad. So then you try to analyze why this is. And you find, for example, this is the way we make photocells. We make several photocells in a row, a whole bunch of them. And then we measure each one to see which one performs best. We notice the one at the edge performs less well than the one at the center. This is interesting. Maybe it's migration or something from the outside. But actually, all of them should perform at maximum, and they all go down. So there is something else in progress. And we found that this something else was an impurity. And we found that if we remove the impurity, which is very hard to do, then this problem will disappear. So I'll skip this because it's a bit too much. The other target that we frequently have is that when you mix two compounds together, two organic compounds together in a photocell, they have a tendency to move around, especially when they are exposed to the sun. When they are exposed to the sun, molecules will tend to want to gather. So if you have two types of molecules, this polymer and this fullerene, what happens is that the fullerene likes to be with fullerene. They will come together. The polymer likes to be with the polymer. It comes together. The trouble is, you need to have a contact between the two. So efficiency goes down. And what we had to learn was how to freeze these molecules in place. Once you make the cell, you must fix everything in place so they can't move anymore. And this is done by a process called photocross-linking. Basically, you build bridges between molecules so they can't move anymore. And this was one of our big targets, if you will, trying to do this photocross-linking. And this is done by modifying, this is again our polymer. You can recognize a donor, the electron-rich, acceptor, electron-poor. And we modify it simply by changing a little bit this substituent here. We introduce a bromine atom. Why a bromine atom? Because when you shine light on the carbon-bromine bond, this bond is weak, it can break. And if it breaks, it produces a free radical. And free radical then combine. So you make a link. So basically what we did is modify the molecule to introduce something that when we shine light on it, it causes a molecule to bond together such that they can't move anymore.